So, how many times do the English have to vote for policies, parties, and platforms that are pro reduction of immigration levels before anyone gets it through their head that we're sick to death of our culture being diluted by enclaves that cannot and will not integrate? By a housing market that has been decimated by a soaring surge in demand and that was outpaced many years ago by our ability to supply? By an ever increasing labour force undercutting Indigenous wages? And by cultures that hold abhorrent values totally alien to our own, and which cannot foster anything but seething resentment at best and bitter hostility at worst. The nation has constantly voted for the Conservative Party and Conservative policies, wet as they may be, since 2010. Yet all we bloody ever seem to get is infinity immigrants, nutty net zero policies, and CRT gender cults in schools. Yep. Under 14 years of supposed Conservatives, we've ended up with drag queens in Doctor Who and bloody tampons in the boys' bathroom, for fuck's sake. We try and vote Tory, yet only get cringe. Every bloody time. UKIP got almost 4 million votes in the 2015 election and received a 12.6% vote share. Brexit, of course, won a right-wing out majority in 2016, and we famously delivered Bojo the highest mandate in his party's history. So why are we still enduring the never-ending terrors of rapes and machete attacks on the streets of little old Blighty? Why are our votes and mandates not affecting change when we constantly advise our representatives that we do not want any of this? So regrettably, there was only ever really one way this was all going to end. And that's unfortunately exactly what we've seen in the events of the past week or two. Events that are clearly exacerbated by Sir Keir of the Two Tiers, who seems to be determined to crack down on the native working man, but seems to not give a single solitary stuff about an occupying force literally wielding swords and machetes on the streets of his own cities.
One man armed with what appeared to be a bat,
An absolute wet wipe of a man, who sent his plod to arrest old blokes in their home for posting naughty things on Facebook, but weirdly has not sent coppers round to nick the Asians brandishing automatic weapons in TikTok videos, and threatening to flat out kill British civilians if they're members of a group that haven't even existed since 2015. AKA the idiot! A spectral boogeyman, resurrected by the scumbag media in order to radicalise and mobilise insurgency forces currently roaming the streets, and to terrorise the ignorant normies into siding with the state via absurdly shallow yet admittedly effective propaganda. Of course, Keir Starling tries to frame the whole debacle as being perpetrated by mindless racist thugs of the far right, who've been whipped up by baseless conspiracy theories and some bloke on a sun lounger in Cyprus. Conspiracies so baseless, they try and get us to pretend that we haven't seen what our lying eyes have clearly seen. That the psycho who stabbed up 8 kiddies and totally killed 3 of them in Southport was just a humble Welshman, and we should just expect extreme violence at Taylor Swift dance parties for the Litlins, merely as part and parcel of living in urban cities, I guess. It doesn't matter apparently that this guy's dad was a Rwandan immigrant if the actual stabber was born here, cause that must mean he's automatically a monocle wearing Brit or sheep shagging Welshie, well if he simply got the correct paperwork right. And of course, the naughty murderer killer can't be that bad if he was once a smiling little boy who once dressed up as Doctor Who for a charity segment on Children in Need back in the day. Cause there's no way anyone working with the BBC would ever do a bunch of bad things or ever be brought into disrepute. Anyway, the point is, it's just another criminal who didn't need to be here. Another foreign import we've welcomed into our country, and who's instead taken advantage of every civilised hospitality afforded to them. So, at what point do we just blame ourselves for constantly being total mugs? I mean, the media want to blame mildly based boomer Nigel Farage. They want to blame right-wing social media and Twitter. And, of course, they really want to indict Romney Tomlinson, who wasn't even in the country when the English finally snapped over more of their children being needlessly carved up on the streets like common hogs. A man who's very likely going to be thrown straight into jail the very minute his feet touch the ground if he ever steps back onto his home soil. And given the intense level of coordinated propaganda and rhetoric employed by the MSM this week, even by outlets that I keep getting told are supposedly right-wing, yet bizarrely marching lockstep with lefty legacy media, and who even insist on playing the bloody pronoun games in their articles, the response has clearly put the fear of God into the elite class. And it's like the man himself said on a recent podcast.
I believe that when things change, are going to change so quick, so fast that everyone... I heard someone... If the government are worried now about the anger they're getting from the Palestinian demonstrations, wait until the entire British public understand what you've done to this country. Something's going to happen where all those people at the minute who have been silenced and not free to speak, when it goes like that, they're not going to be whispering. They're going to be screaming, yeah? Because the vast majority of people have been silenced. And I don't blame them. As I said, I wore a mask and used a fake name. They've got people financed up here. They're just about paying their bills. They've got children, they've got families. They're reliant on their job, which they'll lose if they speak. So everyone's been muzzled. I think when it turns, it will turn so fast. And at that time, I think that people are going to look to who was telling the truth as well. And I think they're going to look at the media. They're going to look at the politicians.
Right.
They're going to be upset. Yeah. And unfortunately for the media and the politicians, people like ourselves are the people who have been telling the truth. So we will gain more trust, more credibility with the public. They know we've been through what we've been through to tell the truth. And I think that we'll get people taken more seriously as time goes on, because everything we're saying is going to be proven.
This convo was from back in March of 2024, and boy, how right he was. The British people can only endure so much. The constant wounds of dead children and relentless atmosphere of terror on the national psyche has totally pushed us to breaking point. And it's simply not something anyone can remotely be surprised about, to be honest. Well, not if you've been paying the least bit of attention, that is. Because that Enoch fella even warned us about it 50 odd years ago, when he described the exact same conditions convening around society in his own period of time.
You see this wherever there is a divided community with a majority and a minority, for everyone immediately says, oh, well, this must be because the minority is being unjustly treated. In fact, in this country, the immigrant minority is not only not being unjustly treated, but they are being treated with a lavish concern, which no minority would enjoy in any other country in the world, so much so, as Mr. Horley said in his report, they can't think what's wrong with our heads the way we carry on. But then people say, there wouldn't have been this violence if we weren't doing something wrong, so they immediately try to find out what it is that they were doing wrong to make up for it. The result of that is simply to put more power, more leverage in the hands of those who are operating the violence. And so it goes on until there is very natural, the technical term is a backlash. You have a backlash, and of course it would be called a white backlash. And so on one side and the other, you have what eventually erupts into a form of civil war. And if we were asked to create the conditions for civil war, we couldn't do better than what we have been achieving and are continuing to accumulate in some of the major cities and industrial areas of this country.
I mean, that Budget Tate brother is totally right. How has this all become a crusade against the far right when they've killed zero kids, for fuck's sake? Well, that's the power of the media, my friends. They've instantly memory hold the incited incident and reframed the narrative back against us. And thinking about it, if they're trying to imply that Indigenous people resisting violent colonisation is now far right, then why are they out supporting Palestine every weekend or wearing Ukrainian badges, for fuck's sake? But at the end of the day, gaslighting the citizens about how they're all being treated is certainly not going to help quell the civil frustrations, and nor will Home Sec Yvette Cooper threatening that, quote, rioters will pay the price. Because it's like, yeah, they already have been Yvette, and so have their daughters. That's why they've all bloody snapped, bro. I mean, things have now got so bad that even the friggin' Irish have unified with the English over it all. Lol, how bad of a government do you have to have solved the decades of troubles simply by uniting both sides against yourselves in under a month? No! And besides, I thought Labour and the left loved people taking to the streets and causing utter carnage. Weren't we told for 6 months straight that, quote, riots were simply the voice of the unheard? Didn't cops and party leaders take a knee for those trashing the nation's capital and destroying public property back in 2020? Well, I suppose terrorising the city was perfectly acceptable when the right people did it, eh? And by right, of course, I mean left. Well, thank God for X and Rumble is all I can say. Though it is a shame it's taken an autistic billionaire to have to buy up a whole website just for people to be able to talk freely and expose a propaganda machine in real time, and mainly by the ability to share on-the-ground primary source videos, which should have been done by a professional journalist class no less. But I guess that's just what it's come to in 2024. 1,000 years of ancestral history, of cherished values of free speech, fair play, truth and integrity, all given up and tossed to the ether, totally sacrificed on the altar of the suicidal multiculturalist project that can never work IRL in principle or practice. And the worst part of all this? It's barely just over a month since Keir and his Labour cronies took power, and already the country is on fire and its people being made into second-class citizens in their own land. 1 bloody month! Just imagine how bad things are going to get in 6 to 12 months, let alone 4 freaking years of his whole term. And especially now he's going to bring in stronger facial ID technology, and has already emptied the prisons of bona fide naughty murderer killers just so we can lock up disenfranchised native-born Brits who've had everything taken from them anyway. And look, I hate to say it, But it does seem at this point like the Tories were acting like some sort of containment plug, holding back the fully crazed socialists by only being milquetoast socialists themselves. And who knows, perhaps that may have been preferable to the flat-out accelerationalism that we're inevitably going to experience for the duration of the next parliament. But like we said earlier, who do we even elect at this point? Who do we have to even represent us? Blokes who want to slit the throats of their political enemies? Or total disappointing wet wipes who throw their own allies under the bus the first chance they get? How can we vote our way out of a system designed to offer the same policies, just at different pace and in alternate colours? Or is it to be something darker and less preferable for the foreseeable future? Well, I'll leave it to you to let me know down in the comments.